you have been extremely clear in what you've told us. So you said this is a major social policy experiment, Dr. Fischer, and it depends a lot on the details as to whether it'll go well or not. And I think you've made those details very clear. So I think given I have a very short time here, I don't particularly want to get into it, although, we have been told that there are serious restrictions of marketing to kids here, and it's only restrictions on marketing products in a way that evoke glamour or excitement. You have set a complete ban, and I appreciate that as your professional opinion. So if I might, Dr. Fischer, ask you about the other thing you said that was quite vociferous and adamant, and that has to do with growing cannabis in the home. So you said it's at categorical odds with public health principles and ought to be swiftly abandoned. And so I'd like, if possible, if you could expand on your reasoning that it should be eliminated. What threats does it pose to the health and safety of adults and children? And so how does it undermine the government's rationale that legalization will improve quality and safety?
Happy to give you further reasons for that. It's a little bit like, if you're trying to keep your house safe and you lock all the front doors and windows and you kind of leave the back door open, if you allow the analogy. We're trying to do a really strictly regulated public health approach to cannabis legalization here, which I think on many ends is pretty well thought through and well designed. We're very strict about who can distribute in terms of retail stores, what products are available, who will have access. But then at the same time, we're saying, well, but if you don't like those official access mechanisms, you can grow the stuff at home. And it's 4 plants according to the law, but first of all, who'll control it? I mean, will the police go into houses and check? Second of all, most people, 15% of the Canadian population are cannabis users, 85% are not. So in homes, inevitably, you'll expose a lot of non-users or vulnerable people to growing cannabis. You don't know what people are growing. It's actually environmentally hazardous to do that. It's not going to kill people immediately, but it's not good for environmental reasons either. And it's a safe recipe for diversion, of course, which we're also trying to avoid through all these other tight regulations that we're trying to do. I think it's a sort of an old-style romanticism associated with cannabis that definitely exists in a lot of user subpopulations, but for a strictly regulated public health approach to use and supply, this is categorically misplaced. Romanticism belongs elsewhere. But there's no sense in just saying, well, then we'll allow 2 plants or 80 centimeters instead of 100. In order to make sense, it has to go. It has no place in a public health-oriented legislation for cannabis.
Can I just ask you a follow-up to that? I won't take your time on this all. People have been producing beer or wine in their homes for some time. Do you see any equivalency there? And
well,
yet they somehow keep it away from children.
That's sort of a boutique-y kind of activity, and is way too complicated to happen in a broad scale kind of approach, because it takes quite a bit of resources, and people typically do that in their garage, not in their living room or in their condominium. We would not allow people, for example, to compound medications in their homes, right? Like we need to be consistent about the principles here, and if we're so strict about purity of cannabis products, who sells, what is sold in the retail stores, and we're focusing on all that, then we don't want to let people sort of grow their own stuff in their own homes in sort of those kinds of domestic environments that most people live in. Most people don't live in a mansion where there's a few extra rooms where the cannabis can be grown. It just doesn't make sense from a public health point of view.
Okay, Senator Seaman.
Okay, if I might, Mr. Jutras-Awad, ask you about something you wrote in 2013, and I'm quoting now. You said, "Cannabis is most used by teenagers since it is perceived by many to be of little harm." This perception has led to a growing number of states approving its legalization and increased accessibility. Most of the debates were done without consideration of its impact on one of the most vulnerable populations, namely teens, or without consideration of scientific data. And you did mention again here for us in your presentation the concern because there is so little evidence, so little empirical evidence about treatment uses and about overdoses, antidotes, and things of that sort. So how do you understand then Canadian teenagers, and is it in fact the same in Canada as it is in states and other countries where this has been legalized, and is there a danger we'll make the same mistakes here?
Well, I guess at this time we don't have much data, and that's part of the data we need in terms of the perception and the understanding of, especially for youth, of legalization and what it means. So I think that's the kind of data we don't have. But I would tend to think that actually that's also why we should be very careful about how we present legalization and how we explain it. We talked a little bit about it a few years ago, Prime Minister Trudeau, when it was announced, but I think that there's still a lot of work to explain that and making sure that it's very clear. We legalize not because cannabis is completely harmless, but we legalize because we think that actually it's a better model than not legalizing. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe for us here is very clear, but I think we have to make it very loud and clear and in different ways, not just on TV, but through web, through all kinds of different strategies to reach youth so that they understand this message very clear.
Okay. Thank you.